Welcome back to Kings of Columbus, and welcome to a story of America and of football. And we couldn't think of a better person to have on this episode with me than Beau Bishop, broadcaster extraordinaire. Just talks football like 8 to 10 hours a day, 365 days a year. Beau, it's so great to have you here on Kings of Columbus.
I feel like this is like a decade in the making, buddy. Like you and I, big ideas, middle of summer. Let's think big. We're fans of interesting. Let's roll.
I think the last time I had you on one of my shows, because I love going on your show, we talked about how Braxton Miller could have been Lamar Jackson. So that was like a big idea.
It's a big idea. That's good.
So that's a big idea. So what's bigger than that? How about the Buckeyes and America?
Oh,
that's how big this is. So we're going to go on a journey here, Beau, and I know you're up for it. And you know what? You're not in the sidecar. You're right on the cycle with me. You got your arms wrapped around my waist. Our hair is blowing in the breeze. We're in this together, brother.
I can't wait.
I am steering, and you kind of have to go where I take this cycle, but I know you're up for it. We'll stop and get a snack. It'll be fine. So
I look forward to it.
The possible headline on this, when you guys clicked on the show, might have been something like, could Ohio State be America's team? That might have been leaning into the flag a little much. I think too many people hate Ohio State for Ohio State to be America's team. But could Ohio State be the new defining team in college football? Where is college football in the hierarchy of American sport? And are we about to enter what I would deem the fifth golden age of Ohio State football? That is all on the table and leading us down toward a discussion about Ohio State as America's team. But here, as we celebrate Independence Day and Independence Week on Kings of Columbus, I want to start, Beau, and you're a great person for this because you host your show. You host a Browns football show. You host a show on 97.1 The Fan in Columbus where we talk about all sports. Is college football America's number 2 sport right now?
It's not close. It's not close. The ratings prove that out. And look, we live in a world where that's the best metric we have to determine what people are interested in. And with some possible exceptions on some fringe sports, but at the lower levels in terms of who's paying attention, college football is the one sport in this country that is ascending. And it has passed everything else in terms of who's watching it and the amount of people that are watching it. It has become a national sport. When you and I were wee lads, it was a sport that was a regional sport largely. You'd watch a big game here or there, and then you'd pay attention to the bowls. But it is now a week-to-week sport. It has been for a while. And I think in the last 5 years, it's really toppled everything else. It is the second most popular sport in this country. The gap will only get bigger. I think that people are underestimating what this 12-team playoff will bring in terms of even more attention to it. I think it'll be better when they get away from the NFL, and I think they got to get the calendar fixed, and I think they will. But I think that the best is yet to come for college football. It's number 2 by a decent margin, and I think the margin between it and 3 will only get bigger going forward.
One of the things is that everybody loves football. So, Mike, let's put that up. Gallup poll from February, your favorite sport, football, 41%. 4 times more than number 2, which is baseball, 10%, basketball, 9%, soccer, 5%, hockey, 4%, auto racing, 3%, figure skating, 2%, and then everything else doesn't have more than 1%. So we're starting off, Beau, with the idea of people love football the most. So I don't know if I even count the NFL as a sport anymore. I think you could argue the NFL is the defining piece of American culture right now. And I think you could have said that before Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, but it doesn't hurt.
No.
But when we're talking about the NFL and what the Super Bowl is and what Patrick Mahomes is and all those things, it's almost beyond sport to me. But the fact that we like to watch people play that game, there's not even worth comparing college football to the NFL, but football, the sport, is so popular. It's why your answer was college football is number 2, and it's not even close.
So think about this. Again, go back to when we were in our formidable years. Television networks have upfronts, right? And if you were, let's say you're NBC in the 90s, you're upfronts. And what that means is you're going to go talk to advertisers. And when you would go talk to advertisers, it would be Tom Brokaw, it would be Jerry Seinfeld, it'd be the cast of Friends. Before that, it would have been the cast of Cheers. Those are the people who represented NBC and said, this is what NBC is. We are these things. Now, NBC, when you think about what is NBC, it's Football Night in America. It's Big Ten football in prime time. They are the face of it. When people were shocked at like the numbers that Romo got or the numbers that Tom Brady got, Fox isn't paying Tom Brady to call football games. They're paying Tom Brady to be the face of Fox. That's the job. He's the face of Fox, the network. There used to be a time it was a network news anchor, popular show, 90210 if it was Fox. No longer. All that we talk about here, it's all television shows. That's all it is. Football is the best television show going by a wide margin. And it's only gets bigger and bigger every single year. And so that's why it's getting spread so thin. I mean, think about the NFL. It was on, you got 2 afternoon games on a Sunday when we were kids and Monday Night Football. That's it. Now it's consistently on Thursdays. It's on Mondays. It's on Sunday nights. You got games all day on Sunday. College football was always this one thing. If they could build it up big enough that the country cared about it, it had the most inventory. It had the most television shows. And that's where this incredible boom has happened. You're exactly right. It's the number one entertainment entity in this country, which is a crazy thing to think that we've gotten here in the last 25 years or so.
I think it cuts across age groups. I think it cuts across culture. It cuts across race. Like everybody there isn't it. I think it cuts across gender more than people maybe would give it credit for. Everybody likes football. So it's interesting to think about Chris Collinsworth is Joey Tribbiani.
That's
Tony
exactly
Romo is Homer Simpson. And it's like, why are you paying an announcer so much? They're the star of the show.
Yeah.
So that's a different thing. That's a very interesting way to think about that. Ratings. Sports Media Watch is a great website. I would direct anybody to there. They just gather every possible rating and they put it in a chart. Last 2023. So like we're halfway into 2024. 2023, the top 56 sporting events by rating NFL. That's like every weekend, every window, right? It's like, the 4:00 games aren't very good. Who wants to watch Rams Cardinals? Everybody does. It beats everything. Top 56 ratings are NFL. Next, the highest rated non-NFL thing in sports in 2023 was Ohio State, Michigan. 19 million. Second was the SEC championship game. Third, now remember, we're up. The championship game is in 24. So this is the national championship game. That was Georgia TCU on January 1st, or early January 2023. Blowout, still third highest. Then the NCAA basketball championship, then the Kentucky Derby, then the NBA Finals from 2023. Beau, this is what we're talking about. Ohio State, Michigan does 19 million last year. People are going crazy. Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals just did 7.5 million in America, 16.3 million America and Canada combined. It's the Stanley Cup Finals Game 7. People argued it was the biggest Game 7 in NHL history. Across Canada and America, did not match Ohio State, Michigan. Game 5 of the NBA Finals. The Celtics are winning their first title in 20 years. 13.3 million this year. 6 million behind Ohio State, Michigan. And the national championship game this year, Washington, Michigan, wasn't on that chart. 25 million. Double. Washington, Michigan, no SEC school in there, did double the final game of the NBA Finals. Beau! It's a blowout.
So as you put that, I'd never thought about this. I've never workshopped this, but this is a big idea show. So I'm just going to drop it. And as you had that graphic up, I was thinking to myself, something that I've been thinking about for a while in regards to football, but specifically college football. College football, you had Ohio State, Michigan. That's 2 Midwestern states that share a border. You had the SEC championship game. So that would have been 2023. That would have been Alabama, Georgia.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Alabama, Georgia. So that's a very deep South, 2 deep South places, right? College football has become national as professional sports, with the exception of the NFL, has become regional. If you think about, if you are in a town that has professional sports, you care about your team, but you don't care about a team out of your market. We're doing this show in Columbus, Ohio. If the Columbus Blue Jackets made a run to the Stanley Cup, it would captivate Columbus, but it would do nothing in Cleveland or Cincinnati or Indianapolis or Pittsburgh. However, Ohio State football would. So there's been a flip that's happened. in how we consume sports. And I have theories as to why it's gotten there. But college football went national as professional sports, except for the NFL, went regional. You care about your team only in the NFL. In college football, you care about all the teams.
But so often in this discussion, isn't the nationalization of college football in many discussions by many people seen as a negative? That people say, oh, we're losing the regional flavor it used to be. Whereas I think college football at its best is exactly what you were pointing out. It's national in scope, but there are regional rivalries that can drive it. But the point is, you care about a region and a rivalry that is not yours.
That's it.
Because of the nationalization, where ESPN, I think, can pretend, and maybe there was a time that people did, that's put the Red Sox Yankees on every Sunday night. One. But maybe that, but I don't know. You put on Dodgers Padres or Dodgers Giants, or like, is there anything else that matters? But you can put on Texas Oklahoma. You can put on Ohio State, Michigan. You can put on Florida State. Like, I think in college football, there's a lot of region things that people do care about nationally, which separates the sport, as you said.
I don't even think people care about Yankees Red Sox anymore, Doug, other than people that are the fans of those two teams.
I don't care. I don't care for sure. I definitely do not care.
I think it's over. I think it's over. I think all of that professional sports on the NFL is micro regional. Unless you're from that area, you do not care. But college football doesn't. And a big reason it doesn't is because what is happening, you use Florida as an example. When that game matters, it affects people in Columbus, Ohio. It affects people in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It affects people in Eugene, Oregon, because it's rated. 12 teams are going to get in, and it's a subjective process, which, while it's messy, is beautiful for guys like us because it's just people's opinion. That's all it is. And there's value in that. So when people say it's losing its regionality, I don't see it. I think if anything, it's more accessible than it's ever been. And now people, I grew up, you're Philly, right? You grew up in, is that right? Do I have that right?
2 hours outside Philly. Yeah.
Okay. PA guy. So, there's Penn State's omnipresent, I'm sure, but it's probably Eagles and Phillies. And I grew up in Montana. And when I think about the teams that mattered to me, I didn't really have access to big time college football, right? Like, as a little kid, I didn't at all. I don't really have any memory of college football until the bowls. I'm talking about when I'm 5 to 10 years old. The Ohio State Michigan game would be on, but it was at 10 a.m. And then I would watch the bowls, and that was kind of my access to college football. And then it all started to flip. And I remember Florida State, Miami in the early 90s being like, my God, that just seems like that matters. The passion came through the television. And that is something that has happened more and more over the past 25 years. And so much of it, Doug, I think has to do with the platforms it's been on. The fact that the SEC was on CBS, a national network, for 30 years at a bargain basement price for CBS. But in exchange, the SEC got this national push every Sunday, every Saturday at 3:30. You were going to get the best game in the best conference. That was their pitch, whether you believe it or not. That was the pitch. And it elevated all of it. And it made Alabama, Georgia, SEC championship game, 18 million people. That's nuts. 25 years ago, never would have happened. Numbers like that. Just wouldn't have. So we've all had a better access to it. I don't think the regionality is lost at all. In fact, Kings of Columbus, Kings of the North, all of that, I think that's all still there in spades. And I think it'll continue going forward because there's going to be two huge power conferences that are going to control this thing.
This is luck. This is the way your sport was built. But the other thing clearly driving is that in today's modern society, the sport of football has two things that I think are required to get people's attention anymore. One is it's an event. It's not every day. It's not a soap opera. It's not like, hey, we lost on Wednesday, but we might win on Thursday, and we went 14-11 this month, but maybe next month we can go 16-12 and that'll be better. Everything's an event and it's violent. And what do people watch at the movies? Like, they don't, it's every football game is the Avengers. Every football game is the horror movie where every football game matters and there's people running into each other. And I think at some point it can't change, but I think the NHL and Major League Baseball and the NBA at some point must be like 82, 162. What could we do to boil this thing down to 16 or 20 and get people to care? Because back in the day when you had nothing else to do, it's like, give me 162 baseball games. This is awesome. My life is boring. Now your life is explosive. It's minute to minute. You have no time for 162. But you know what you can do? You can pull up a chair on Saturday.
That's right. Yeah. There's an immediacy. There's an every game mattered. I don't think it'll change much with the 12-team playoff. In fact, I think you'll have even more games in November that matter going forward. The other thing that this sport has going for it that even really the NFL doesn't have exactly, although I'm with you to stay away from that comparison in all ways, is in college football, you are rooting for laundry, right?
Yeah.
We're used to every 3 or 4 years a turnover, right? So you're rooting for a helmet and you're rooting for a jersey and nostalgia and your memories and a stadium and what it means to you, how it affects you emotionally. There are heroes that come and they go, but they always go. So there is no downturn if you're a place like Ohio State, and they've been lucky enough not to have a downturn in 50 years, 70 years. But there's the consistency of it. It's there for you. You know what to expect. If you are someone who went 50 years ago and you went now, it'd feel largely the same. I mean, people worry. It's so funny. People always bristled about the NIL and all of this. It affected nothing. Nothing. More people are watching than ever.
And I do think the one other thing that the natural turnover of college football, there was a time when professional sports, if you're a Yankees fan, Derek Jeter is going to be in your life for 2 decades. Derek Jeter is going to be in your life from the moment your child is born till when that child graduates from college. Patrick Mahomes may be that in Kansas City, but for the most part, the pro sports don't have that anymore. Maybe that was an advantage previously. Now, roster turnover. Hey, there's constant roster turnover in college football. You mean like there is in every sport? So like that maybe what connected people, because I do think you connect in the end, and I've come a long way on this. I'm like a big tank and suck and get draft picks guy. But somewhere along the line, Corey Kluber helped me do it with the Guardians of, you know what, there's value in a player being great and having a connection to that player, even if that player isn't going to get you over the top for a title. It's worth it to root for Joe Thomas and the Browns. You're connected to Corey Kluber. But pro sports has lost that, which college football never had. So guess what? Now you're connected to jerseys and hats and helmets and uniforms in every sport, which you've always been with college football.
There's no doubt. Yeah, there's no doubt. And so it is set up. And now what does it do with it going forward? And how big can the gap become between it and everything else? I mean, I think that's kind of where we are now. I think most people, even the old curmudgeons who love baseball or NBA or whatever, like they all can acknowledge. And I think it's honestly been widely underserved by our profession. There aren't enough people over the last decade who have been doing what you and I are doing right now, or what I do Monday through Friday in Columbus. Like, people have been, especially in the big markets, worried about getting into college football, and they've been stuck in this rut. And all of us have come in and we benefited from it because there is an incredible audience who wants to talk about this all the time. And quite honestly, it's more of a soap opera than anything else. We still have all the he said, she said stuff that we had in the people called it the ugly underbelly of the sport, like in the 80s, like Pony Excess and all that stuff. I loved all of that. And now it's still going on, except it's above board.
Beau's like, give me a bag man. Come on. I want all the bag man story.
Oh, give me a gold Trans Am. Who gets hurt? Let's go.
But that is part of it is as I said, like, I covered Major League Baseball as a beat writer for 4 years. And that's what people, I was very young and learning it. And I said, it's a soap opera. It's a soap opera day to day. This affects this and this affects this. But college football does have that without having it. It doesn't have to be a game, because their recruiting is all of that. And actually now the transfer portal is part of that. And NIL deals are part of that. And conference realignment has been part of that. And I think sometimes we can all get caught up in too much off-field stuff with college football when the on-field stuff is banging. But soap opera? Are you kidding me? My wife just started watching Bridgerton. Don't watch Bridgerton. Just follow college football. It's nuts right now. People are in Congress trying to figure this stuff out. There's always something to talk about.
That's a huge point. Think of it this way. The college football season used to end January 1st. Bowl games and we're out. So it's September to January. So now the season stays in that window, right? pretty much that window. But because you now have you have a signing day in December, another one in February, you have 2 portals that are open, and you have the conference realignment that happens in the summer. Year round, there's news. It doesn't stop. You don't have to take a break from it. And what that does is it sets the agenda for the audience, which is ravenous for it. They can't wait to talk about it. You're setting the agenda that this is important year round, and they're ready for it. They're more than ready for it, much like how the NFL has done, quite honestly. It's not a mistake that those two things go about their off seasons very similarly. The NFL built its off season around the NFL Network, right? That's why they moved the draft into May. They had free agency at a certain time, and all of these things happened so that they had content year round for the NFL Network. College football is there now. They're there. We're here.
America. All right. Golden Ages, America's team. We've established it's indisputable. College football is America's number 2 sport. So what does that mean for the Ohio State Buckeyes, where they are, where they could go? We'll do that next on Kings of Columbus. Back with the great Beau Bishop here on Kings of Columbus. Could Ohio State be college football's new defining team is where we're getting here. America, Buckeyes, college football. Here's the idea. We're going to do this more later on Kings of the North. I think the Saban hole is being underestimated. And I have not done all the research, but this is a seismic change. And when we get to it on Kings of the North, I will have my top 10 list of the most impactful departures in American sport in the past 50 years. And I'm telling you, if Nick Saban is number 2 behind Michael Jordan, do not be shocked.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. This is gigantic. But what I want to do at the moment is look at this through the Ohio State lens. So I did a little shorthand, just like a little quick boom, bang, boom. The defining team in college football, and defining team to me, Beau, let's decide on this definition first. Okay. You have to be good. You have to win titles, but to be truly defining, what everybody else is doing is trying to beat you. So in defeat, you are definitive. If you think about Alabama, Ohio State's defining moment of the past 20 years is beating Alabama in 2014. What is defining if you think Georgia is a little new mini dynasty, the next superpower, how are they defined? By getting over the Bama hump. How was LSU defined? LSU, which could make a case as one of the great teams in college football history. What was the big deal that year? Beating Bama in the regular season. I think from 09 through 23. So it's not right away with Saban, but it's the first title with Saban in 09 through 23. Like it's indisputable, but that's the defining team. Do you like my definition of defining?
Well, I love the definition of defining. And I think that he provided a hurdle that was necessary for you to be legitimized. You had to go over that. I don't know if the 14 title feels the same if it's not a win against Bama in the Sugar Bowl. It was all of those things. Nobody beats them down there. I remember talking to Urban and Shelley, especially Shelley, after that game, and like in disbelief. Like, we just beat Bama here. And that mattered to them because going back to Florida, it was the same thing. Like, Saban came in as Urban was kind of on his way out, but it was like Saban took it right from him in that time. So they provided, if you could beat them, it legitimized you. So I do agree with that. The only other thing I would like to add to the America's team or defining team thing, and this is where I think Ohio State could really come into play. America's team in the NFL is the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys haven't won anything in a very, very long time, and they're still considered by most to be America's team. That's the way that they're going. They're still the most popular team. We talked about ratings earlier, right? They're still far and away the ratings king, even though they haven't won anything since 95. You have to be polarizing. You have to be loved and hated. And I think that's the thing that Ohio State also has going for it. It has a monster fan base. There are Ohio expats everywhere, especially all throughout the Sun Belt, out west, everywhere. They are boisterous. They wear red hoodies that say Ohio on them. They yell OHIO in the airport. They're this big behemoth, and they like to tell you about it. And so they're hateable too. The polarizing part, I think, is also a key to defining. And I think when you think about America's team defining team, I think Ohio State is at a central casting for this.
Man, I'm getting fired up. Okay.
I like that one.
So
that's good.
I've got
those two combinations.
This is so we've got Bama from 09 to 23. I had Mike. We can do the list. USC 03 to 08. Now it's a small window, but I think that's what the sport was. They won back-to-back titles in 03 and 04. In 05, they're the team of the century, and Vince Young beats them. That's defining. Texas is defined by beating USC in the game of the century. 2006. What's one of the ways that we get to Ohio State, Florida is because USC loses at the end of the year. So USC is still, before Saban really gets it rolling, this is where USC finishes. Back-to-back titles, 03 and 04, second, fourth, third, and third in the final AP poll, up through 08 before Saban takes over. Now, guess what? Urban at Florida is winning national titles in 06 and 08, but I still think the vibe of the sport is West Coast, Pete Carroll, Will Ferrell's at practice, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, even up through 08, Ohio State going out to USC to get their doors blown off by Mark Sanchez and Ray Maliuga and all those guys. I still think it's a short window, but I think there's a mini Carroll defining dynasty at USC before Saban takes over. You okay with that?
I am, and I would just further that by saying that they were the modern day celebrity team.
Yes.
There were no Rams or Chargers in Los Angeles. This is catching the end of the Lakers dynasty. The Dodgers weren't worth a damn. They owned the second largest market in this country. They had it to themselves. They were the thing to do. Snoop Dogg, Farrell, you mentioned it. Reggie Bush was dating Kim Kardashian while Matt Leinart was dating Paris Hilton in college. That happened. So there was a celebrity to them that was different even than anything we had seen previously or quite honestly since. So yes, they were in my time around the sport, they were the glamour program. Like it was like SC, Traveler, and the Song Girls, the whole bit. Like, no, that brand traveled.
So it was small, but it was defining. All right.
Yeah.
Bama 09 to 23, USC 03 to 08. 83 to 02, I've got Miami and Florida State together. And I was just going to go with the U. 83 is the first national title for the U. And 02 is defined by Ohio State upsetting the U. They go out. They are definitive in defeat. Now, I know you covered Bobby Bowden at Florida State, so I had to give a tip of the cap because Florida State is winning national titles. This is a long period. They're going head-to-head with Miami. They're playing every year. In like a 20-year stretch here that I'm talking about, I think Miami has a 12-8 edge over Florida State, but Florida State's right there with multiple titles. So I threw Florida State in as a co here, but I think my main point is it's not SEC. For everybody who thinks that the sport began with the SEC, it did not. It was Florida. Florida was where the talent was. Florida was where these two dynasties were cohabitating in that state. What do you think of 83 to 02, Miami and Florida State defining the sport?
I like to put them together because Miami has the higher mountaintops that they scaled, but Florida State is the better mountain range. Florida State never slipped. From 83 to 01, Florida State did not slip. They had a stretch from, I want to say, 88 to 01, where they finished in the top 4 in the country every single year. They were there every single year. The other thing that's interesting about this, because you talk about barometer setting programs or the standard, Florida State, Bowden went on a "we'll play you anywhere, anytime" in, I want to say 82 or 83, where he went at Ohio State, at Pitt, at Nebraska, at Tennessee, at LSU. I want to say, if memory serves, I haven't thought about this in a while, but like 5 of them in the first month and a half of the season went 3-2, and it legitimized his program because they won them. And then he started winning recruiting battles in the state of Florida. There was putting them together is for sure the right thing because you're right. It was Florida. There was something that it was just cool. Florida high school football was cool. Florida college football was cool. Hell, the Gators won a national title in this in '96. They elevated up. So there was a time where those two programs, FSU, what'd you say, 5 for Miami, 2 for FSU. But it was the amount of talent that was coming out, the hit factor that they had, and the fact that honestly, Florida State's decision to go ACC over SEC was a wild one that was made at the time They propped up the ACC, and then the U's decision to follow Florida State into the ACC after being in the Big East was another one that kind of determined where we are now. But no, when you think of that, this is our formidable age, right? I mean, this is when we're kids. These two programs, I think that's fair to be the two.
So then I did one more age, and this is 61 to 82, and it's Alabama. And 61 is Bear Bryant's first title at Alabama, and 82 is the year that Bear Bryant retires. I'll tell you what, some of this, like you start doing errors, and it's like Bear Bryant retires in 82, the U wins its first title in 83.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The U loses to Ohio State in 02. USC wins its first title in 2003. Okay, that works. Like USC still doing its thing with Pete Carroll through 08. Saban comes in, wins his first title in 09. There's some kind of clear defining lines here. Now, you can make some arguments here. I did a lot of Woody Hayes versus Bear Bryant comparisons. They coached at Alabama and Ohio State at the same time for 21 years, 1958 through 1978. In those 21 years, Bear Bryant had the better record 13 times. Woody Hayes had a better record, not better record, higher finish in the final AP poll, both multiple national championships. If you go by overall winning percentage, 58 through 78, Bama 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, can't forget about Paterno, Arizona State 4, which is like sometimes you look at the list with Arizona State and think, how did they get so bad? Ohio State 5. So Ohio State overall in that period, not quite as good as Bama. You go 68 through 77. I cut off 78 because that was a little more of a down year for Woody. Penn State has the best winning percentage. Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Oklahoma 4, Notre Dame 5, Nebraska, Texas, Bama. So like Bears, not quite as good there. Bottom line is there's lots of great coaches here. Yeah. Darrell Royal's doing his thing at Texas, and Bo Schembechler's doing his thing at Michigan. And you could make an argument, Joe Paterno at Penn State, there are multiple powers throughout the country. But Bear Bryant, at least before Nick Saban, was the greatest coach in college football history. We're not going to sit down and have a Bryant-Saban discussion on Kings of Columbus right now. But I'm okay with this, with acknowledging other great teams are there, clearly including Ohio State. But I think Bear was the guy who defined the sport at least slightly more than anyone else.
Yeah, everybody you mentioned is the favorite coach of that school you mentioned. Darrell Royal, Bo Schembechler, Woody Hayes, Bear Bryant. I mean, Joe Paterno. These are titans at Big State U. And this is the time when the sport became, hey, that's a fun little thing that's played, and it's a little intercollegiate thing too. It became big business. It started at this time. The other thing that's interesting about Bama, and I agree with this part, this also is the integration of the South. So this is when you started to see African-American players playing at Alabama. For the longest time they didn't. They weren't allowed. And so that happened there too. So Bear's on both sides of that. He's on the pre-integration Bama, and then he gets, with this time frame, he also gets the integration of the Southeastern Conference with African-American players. So those things happen too. So this was kind of like the time when the Southern schools played on a totally level playing field. And there's a great bit about when USC went to Tuscaloosa and beat them up. And Bear wanted that because why? USC was integrated. And look what happens. And that was part of it. So I think there's a lot of layers to this time frame, but I think Bear is the defining guy. You do Mount Rushmore of college football. You can argue about who else is there, but he's on it for sure. And he is the one that I think represents this time best.
Yeah. If you're doing 4, I think you got Bear on one end and Saban on the other, and you're fighting over the 2 spots in the middle.
Agreed.
Okay. Why are we doing this? Because I want to ask the question of whether Ohio State can be the new defining team in college football. So we got like 40 minutes to build up to the real thing at the end of this. But the idea of that question, because it's not going to be Bama anymore. Sorry, Kalen DeBoer. Not sorry. Oh, Kalen DeBoer is not as good as the greatest coach in college football history. It's not a slam, brother. But if you think Bama's going to still be Bama, you don't know Nick Saban. How can you simultaneously say nobody's ever been better than this guy and be like, they're fine? How can that be? It can't be.
This was several years ago. You and I were doing a hit, and we were talking about the SEC dominance. We were talking about the run that they'd been on really the last 20 years and all the different schools that had won it. And the notion of like, God, it would be something if the Big Ten was like that. And we could have 5 or 6 teams win national titles. And one of the things that I'll give you credit for, the first one I ever heard say it is, college football doesn't have an SEC problem. They have a Saban problem. That if you just took Saban out of Alabama and they just won one title during that time, it would have been far more evened out. But he hogged it. He hogged it. And so that is the thing that I'll never forget you saying that. The first person I ever heard say that. It wasn't an SEC problem. It was a Saban problem. And that's on point. And now he is gone. It's a vacuum. When you think about Ohio State trying to become the next defining team and what is required of that, I think something changed dramatically with the third loss to Michigan. I think something changed dramatically watching Michigan win the national championship. I think it was not coincidence that night Quinshon Judkins decided he was going to transfer to Ohio State. And we all went, what? They got Travion Henderson. What are they going to do with all this? And I'm a fan of history. I had this quote and I read it on my show the next day. And you're familiar with the PBS documentary, The Civil War, the great Ken Burns.
Yes.
Okay. There's a historian on that named Shelby Foote. So I read this on my show that Tuesday after the national championship. This is the quote. I think that the North fought that war with one hand tied behind its back. At the same time the war was going on and the Homestead Act was being passed, all these marvelous inventions, spring of 64, Harvard-Yale boat races were going on, not a man volunteered. They didn't need them. If there would have been more Southern victories and a lot more, the North would have just brought the other arm out from behind its back. I don't think the South ever had a chance to win that war. I think in this instance, Ohio State took the other arm out from behind its back. That's what had happened. It had had enough. Michigan had won 3 straight. They won the national championship. We're sick of it. Ohio State, when I first got here, Doug, they would look down their they would look down their nose at the SEC because they were cheating and they were doing it wrong, and we're doing it right. We're trying to be Stanford in academics and Alabama in football, but we're past that now. Past that. Ohio State took the other arm out from behind its back, and because of NIL, and because it's all above board, now they can play in the sandbox fully with both fists forward. And I think that's when you say the defining program going forward, that's what comes to my mind. I think it started that Monday. Now you got to go win. You got to go win and win big. But they've done it now, and they're playing a different sport now than they were 5 years ago, even, and certainly 20.
I'm making a note to myself to read more Civil War historian quotes on Kings of the North. Oh man, I'm bringing that one out. Steal that straight from you.
Unbelievable.
I mean, like if somebody wants me to do a 90-minute show on why NIL is like the Industrial Revolution and the power of the North, well, like we can go there. What's this?
Listen, there's some parallels here, brother. When you talk about that, the industry here, the business here, the money here. Now the money can be spent for players. It's above board. It's different.
Oh man. Okay. We're keeping this on Ohio State. If you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't tried Kings of the North, it's all this. It's all this. It's all this. Yeah. The North is rising up and the South can cram it. It's just this. Try it. Yeah. Kings of the North. Okay. Mike, we're not taking a break. We're running right into segment 3, which is this. If Ohio State is going to be college football's new defining team, it will be a new golden age of Ohio State football. And I believe there have been 4 golden ages of Ohio State football, just like, it's like the dinosaurs dying or whatever. Like you do Civil War historians, I'm doing archaeology and anthropology. It's like there was the one dinosaur, then a meteor hit, then the second dinosaur. So we're doing that. So the 4 golden ages of Ohio State football, listen, they existed before Woody Hayes, but did they? They did. Of course they did. They won a national title in 1942. But one of the things in common here, Beau, and this is what we'll lead up to at the end. All of the golden ages that I have outlined here are preceded by something bad. Mm-hmm. It's always darkest before the dawn kind of stuff here, which is you can find some darkness in the last 3 years of Ohio State football. You don't have to look very far, Ohio State fans. So I think the first golden age, and they're all about a decade long, this golden age. And again, it's the best of the best of the best. So we'll run through these golden ages and see if we might be arriving at number 5 now. First golden age is Woody 1. This is an 8-year period from 1954 to 1961. It's his first national title in 1954, win again in 57, win again in 61. 4 Big Ten titles in 8 years, 3 national titles. They're 6-2 against Michigan. Yes, there was some good stuff before this, but what's the darkness? Well, Woody didn't come in right away and kill it. It took a couple of years, not very long, but Wes Fessler quits because the pressure is too great. That's where Ohio State football is. Wes Fessler has won, but after 1950 is like, I'm out of here. Like, this is nuts. And Woody says, I got it. So Woody's here 51, 52, 53, wins the national title in 54, and sets up a career as one of the great coaches in college football history. That's the darkness there to me, Beau, that like, I wasn't alive in 1950, even though I may look like I was. Are you questioning, is football, does it matter too much? Or are priorities not in order? Where are we as a university and as a football program where our pretty successful, loyal Buckeye just said, I'm punting, I'm out. And what do we do? And what happens is Woody Hayes. So there's some darkness, and then there is a banger run, 3 national titles in 8 years.
Yeah. And I think this era, and again, like you, I wasn't alive for this, but just reading about it and watching stuff about it, it feels like this is that Ohio State represented everything Woody Hayes was and wanted to be and what he wanted Ohio to be. You're coming out of the Second World War. You're 10 years after it now or thereabouts at this point. Those people are now grown. They're having kids. And this is still that era. I always think of it from the perspective of Mad Men. Like, this is early Sterling Cooper Draper, right? Or Sterling Cooper Price, right? Or Sterling Cooper, I guess it was at the beginning. But it's like behind fog glasses and we're smoking cigarettes and that's it. And then we get later and you got to make some changes. All of a sudden, Roger's got mutton chops on his head, and that's coming too with the second Woody era, I would imagine. But this to me feels like everything that Woody Hayes, the apex of what he wanted Ohio State football to be, acknowledging that his better teams came later. Right.
So this is Woody 1. Okay, we agree on this. What's the second golden era? It's Woody 2. And I have this from 1968 to 1977. It's a 10-year period. It's a little bit off of the 10-year war because the 10-year war is 69 to 78 because Beau doesn't take over at Michigan until 1969. But this starts with Woody. Everybody knows it. People are asking, should Woody Hayes be fired? And all of a sudden, here we are with the Super Softs. Greatest team. I mean, like, we can argue greatest team in Ohio State history is a fun argument, but the Super Softs hit, and now we're off to the races. 9 Big Ten titles in 10 years. 2 national titles because they have the one in 70 that they lose the Rose Bowl, but they still got a national title. They're 5-4-1 against Michigan because guess what? Michigan's good. But they're playing bangers against Michigan. They're have at least a little edge on their rival. 2-time Heisman winner. They should have more. They should have more national titles here. They went to the Rose Bowl and punted away probably 3 shots at the national title. They should have gotten at least one of those. But this is an incredible 10-year. And what's the darkness? The darkness is this run from 62 to 67 where people are wondering, like, if Woody Hayes has lost it. And the answer is no, I haven't lost it. So again, we have to remember the darkness, and then here's the golden era, number 2.
No problem with it. I think if you talk, most Buckeye people revere this era the most. This is their favorite time in Buckeye history.
So now the gap is longer. There's not another golden era until Tress. So I don't know that there's much argument here. I mean, Earl Bruce practically wins the national title in 79, right? John Cooper has teams that in a 4-team or 12-team playoff probably would have gotten one. But we understand you can't have an era that's defined by 9-3 Earl and 2-10-1 Coop and call it a golden era. So this is the darkness where Ohio State is good, but not quite everything it can be and should be. It's not a national title contender under Earl, and it can't beat Michigan under Coop. So I have a 24-year gap of darkness here before we get to the third era.
I would just add that this is why Ohio State football is what it is, because their darkness ain't that dark. They were always wildly relevant.
Bama got driven off a cliff. When Bama's dark, Bama drives off a cliff. When Texas is dark, it drives off a cliff. When Michigan is dark, it drives off a cliff. When USC is dark, it drives off a cliff. They're driving along the edge of the cliff, and they never fall all the way in, but sometimes the tires are over the edge. But you can't, no Ohio State fan would argue this. Oh, I think Coop had a golden era.
No.
You can't. They should. It's just but you're right. You're right.
Your dark ages were coached by 2 guys who are in the College Football Hall of Fame.
No Brady Hoax on this list, brother.
No, that's never missed.
So it leads up to what I have as a 9-year run, because Tressel year one, like he gives the speech, whatever, but it really starts with 2002 through 2010, 9-year era for Tress, 7 Big Ten titles, 1 national title, 2 other national title game appearances, 8-1 versus Michigan. Absolute golden era, no doubt about it. But again, it was clearly, it rose up from something because Tress did the things that his predecessors couldn't, which was for Earl, win the national title, and for Coop, beat Michigan, and Tress did them both.
He did. And he was probably, I think, you and I both covered Jim. And I think probably for most Buckeye fans, there was something so comforting about the way that he went about his business, the senatorial, the senator, all of that stuff. Like he was so dignified all the time. Sometimes I was like, come on, dude, let's be real. This can't always be like this. But it was like, come on, enough. But no, he did that. And I think this era probably mirrors a little bit that first Woody golden era. This is kind of everything in a perfect world, what you'd want Ohio State football to be, is kind of the heyday of this era, beating Big Bad Miami, all of the things that came with it.
And again, for people, if this was your introduction to Ohio State football, like it's in you forever. And if it's not your introduction, if your introduction was Woody and then you had 2+ decades of not quite good enough, disappointment, heartbreak, good football, but not good enough, then Tress is a hero. So this is the third golden era. Now, so between golden eras, the first gap, it was a 6-year gap. The second year gap was a 24-year gap, right? Between Woody 2 and this. 1 year gap. One year gap between Golden Era 3 and Golden Era 4, because it starts right away with Urban Meyer, who goes 12-0 in 2012 and begins the fourth Golden Era, which is Urban Meyer / early Ryan Day. So this is 9 years from 2012 to 2020, 5 Big Ten titles, 1 national title, 8-0 Michigan, plus the COVID year. So this again is like, man, could they have gotten another national title in here? Yeah, they could have. The fact that, you look back and it's like they didn't win the Big Ten in 15, they didn't win the Big Ten in 16, but they are absolutely the defining Big Ten program of this era and winning at an incredibly high level. It's golden era number 4.
Yeah, it's the modernization of the Ohio State program. It was I remember when Urban first got here, Mark Pantoni came to Channel 10 and he was like, I got to modernize this facility. Like, do you guys have old clips of the Buckeyes, like Woody era, like just moments? Like, we don't have video. Like, we want to make hype videos. We want to have streams in the building. Like, all of the things that they had done in the South, we didn't do here. This didn't. And so it's the modernization of the Buckeye program. I also think it's the NFLization of the Buckeye program, which was, and they're still doing it to this day, you come here, we'll make you a pro. And there was something that was very real about that part of it. So I think Urban's time here, I would argue, is the best year in, year out Ohio State's program has ever been. From the first year he got here to the time he left, I think that was kind of like the apex of what it could be. It's wild they only got 1 because of how good all those teams were. But I think about what it can be at its best. It was that run.
So 6-year gap between Woody 1 and Woody 2, 24-year gap between Woody 2 and Tressel, 1-year gap between Tressel and Urban Meyer. But there was a lot of pain in that 1 year. There was 10 years worth of pain for Ohio State fans with going 6-7, but everything with the sanctions, the games those players lost, what you thought was maybe going to happen to the program. So again, you have to, I want to emphasize the darkness, because we want to emphasize the idea that Woody Hayes almost got fired. We want to emphasize the idea that Ohio State didn't win a national title for 3 decades. We want to emphasize the idea that it felt like maybe Ohio State was on the precipice of being the new SMU and that their program was going to be in the tank for a decade because of these off-field NCAA sanctions. Because guess what that does, Beau? It makes 3 straight losses to Michigan, which is bad. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to Ohio State football before it got really good again.
No, it's interesting because every one of these things that you've talked about, this darkness that precedes the dawn, in all of the instances, there's varying degrees or reasons for the desperation. I would argue that while this is far, because you've been relevant, you've been in the mix, like you've been undefeated, you've been, you're right there. There's a lot of coup to this, honestly. If you had Ryan in the early Ryan to 2020, this feels a lot like the coup years. I get that all the time from people. Like, we win every game, but we don't beat Michigan. It's like we've got the best team, but we don't beat Michigan. Then the one year you get that chance against Georgia, and then it all would have gone away had you just beat Georgia. You would have won it anyway, but you didn't. So there's something missing here. It's not the talent. What is it? And that's what led to it. And that's when that analogy of taking another fist out from behind your back, the darkness got dark that Monday night, watching them win a national championship and watching them do so the way they did with the allegations of cheating at the games and stealing signs and all of that stuff. It was just enough. And it got real dark, even though the program was still a top 5 program in the country while this was happening.
Quick break. When we come back, will Ohio State enter a 5th golden age? Doug Lesmerises and Beau Bishop back after this. So, Beau, for the people who are saying, "Hey, this Bishop fella, quite a character here. Lots of smart football talk and Civil War references." If they want to find you more often, and who doesn't know who Beau Bishop is, but what are you doing when you're not on Kings of Columbus?
I host Bishop and Friends 9 to noon on 97.1 The Fan in Columbus. Do Cleveland Browns Daily as well, 1 to 3 on 850 ESPN Cleveland. So football. I got you covered on those type of things, my friend.
He's a talker. But I like talking, but I like thinking. And I like Beau because he's a thinker. And so we are thinking about this to wrap this up. Could Ohio State be entering its 5th golden era? And so, who's to define? I just defined the golden era. If someone else can make your own golden era. But by my definition, what you don't do is ease in to a golden era. You drop the hammer to start a golden era. So Mike, our great producer, these are the first seasons for each of the first 4 golden eras as I define them. 1954, 10-0 national champs. 1968, 10-0 national champs. 2002, 14-0 national champs. 2012, 12-0, but they were banned from the postseason. Because I didn't include, yes, people were excited about Jim Tressel being hired, but going 7-5 and going to the Outback Bowl in year 1 is not the beginning of a golden era. So it's not coaching hires. Just like don't let other parameters define what you want to define, which is why on Kings of the North, we're not letting conferences define geography and define rivalry. So we're defining we're defining greatness. We're defining you being definitive. We're defining Ohio State making a case to rule college football. You don't ease into that, which leads us to the point, Beau. If you're going to define the golden eras this way, then maybe Ohio State's ready to drop a hammer and start a new golden era, because that's how they've done it so far. So I am leaping from, can Ohio State avoid a 4th straight loss to Michigan? I am leaping from natty or bust. I am leaping from, will they win the first national championship of the 12-team playoff? I am leaping to, are they about to embark on and begin with a undefeated national championship season, the 5th golden era of Ohio State football? Does that sound crazy to you, or should we start printing the t-shirts?
Well, here's the only thing I would bring up, because as your fantastic producer had up there, he had those seasons where the golden eras embarked. And I can't speak to 54. I don't know what the hype was like leading into that, but every single one of those kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, this
Super
one
Sox
were like beating the veterans in practice in 67, but it's not the same thing as this.
But it wasn't, I don't know where they started the year preseason. I have no idea. But like 02 came out of nowhere. 2012. I mean, we thought Urban would be good, but Braxton, we'd only seen him as a freshman. We had no idea. I knew, because I saw him at Florida, I knew what he was capable of, but I didn't think it would go like that right away. So this one will have to defy Buckeye logic a bit, because Ohio State wins national championships not with its most talented teams. That's something that has been 50 some years in the making here. Really, 69 was more talented than 68. Certainly 15 more than 14. And a lot of people say 05 was better than 02. So there's all of these instances where their most talented, best teams don't win it. So if this is to be a golden era, and it is going to drop a bomb, and it starts right now with an undefeated national title in the first year of a 12-team playoff, this Buckeye team is going to have to buck Buckeye tradition, which is the teams that we say are going to win it typically don't. So they're not coming from out of nowhere. They're either first or second in the country to start the year. And so I do think the other thing that's really critical about this is you talk about another golden era in Buckeye football. If this doesn't go well, then what?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about Urban was not going to get run after not going. Tress was in year 2. Woody has that. The second Woody, the 68 team has some of that, a little anxiety around it. But the other 2 golden eras, the Tressel and the Irwin, we're just getting started. Ryan's into it now. And I'm not here to suggest that he's on a sort of hot seat or he's going to get fired or anything like that. But if for some reason this team doesn't beat Michigan or is 1 and out in the playoff, then it goes off. Then what? Because you have so much. I'll say this. It's certainly set up for that. But there is more into this season than any that I can recall in my 18 years being around this program. There's nothing else that I can think close to this in terms of what's into this season. I mean, Chip Kelly's the offensive coordinator, for God's sakes. Think about that. I mean, they went as all in as you can go. So they're saying, what do you need to do it? Here's all of it. But he better do it, or else this gets nuts in a hurry. So it's there for him. But they're going to have to do something this program typically doesn't do, which is win when you're expected to.
68 team 11th in the preseason. Just double checked, which is not what these guys are going to be. They're going to be 1 or 2.
1 or 2.
But let's just for argument's sake, let's just say they go undefeated and win the national championship. Let's just start there. So we're starting there. The idea of, because if they do hit a golden age here, I want to bring this discussion back to where we started segment 2, which is, could you envision a world where this next era of college football is defined by a team in Columbus, Ohio, is defined by a team not from a warm weather or climate, not from Hollywood, not from Florida, not from the deep South? And again, Ohio State's been right there. But if you're going to listen to my list, I would argue that Ohio State has never been the single defining program, and probably the right answer. I think we were right on with Bama, USC, and the Florida schools. Probably the older Bama thing is actually, it was such a regional sport back then that Bama defined the South and Texas defined the Southwest and Ohio State and Michigan defined the Midwest and Penn State defined the East, right? And it wasn't as much of a national definition. But now it's clearly a national definition. Could that be the world that college football would live in? That the sport now says, hey, man, road to the title goes through Columbus. Is that possible?
100%, totally possible. We've been close to it many times in several of the golden years, as you defined. You've been very close to it. I guess what I would push back to you is, what's preventing that from happening?
Well, Nick Saban was preventing it previously,
but he's gone.
So right now, in a world where the Big Ten, and I would say previously at times, the lack of strength of the Big Ten had prevented it, which allowed Ohio State to dominate everybody in the regular season. But then Tress gets to the national title game in 06 and 07. It's like, hey, you're not good enough. And maybe your dominance of your conference is a little bit of a facade. So there have been things in the recent past that did prevent it. But I guess if you're saying there's nothing, Saban's gone. NIL has changed the conversation. Realignment, they are now in one of the 2 powerhouse conferences where if Ohio State was in the Big 12 or the ACC, we could not have this conversation. Or if the Big 10 had been left behind when it comes to TV or money or size or power compared to the SEC, we wouldn't have this conversation. The Big 10 has not been left behind. So I guess my answer is, my only answer would be, are we just at a point with the sport? And then, if you start a show called Kings of the North, you don't believe this, but are we at a point with the sport where it can't be a Northern team? It's just a Southern sport. It's got to be a Southern team. That would be the only thing that to me would be standing in the way of Ohio State having this chance to define the next decade.
Ohio State they've already gone over that hurdle, though. I mean, look at where their quarterbacks come from. Julian Sands from California, Aaron Nolan's from Georgia, CJ Stroud was from California, Justin Fields was from Georgia. Like, they've already done that. They've gotten receivers from Texas and South Florida. Ohio State recruits more nationally than they ever have before. They could walk into any room in the country and say, you come here, we will make you a pro. What they do on a program development, player development standpoint was second only to Alabama, and it wasn't by much. Georgia's right there too. And so, no, I don't think there's anything preventing. I think the other thing about this that I would acknowledge, and some people aren't comfortable with it, but I am, those SEC schools are going to take turns. They're going to take turns because there's 10 of them down there. Doug, you start counting the SEC schools that wake up in the morning and say, hey, let's go win a national title. Now, whether you believe it or not, irrelevant. They believe it. Auburn believes that. Just count them. Georgia believes that. Florida believes that. Tennessee believes that. Alabama believes it. Texas A&M believes it. Oklahoma believes it. Texas believes it. LSU believes it. Who doesn't? Maybe Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas. There aren't many. There's 10 down. So they're going to take turns beating each other up. Michigan is going to go through, I know you're higher on them than I am this year, but they are going to go through some bumps coming up here. I'll never take them lightly, but this is going to be different for them. USC is not coming in here the way that we thought they were going to come in this thing. Oregon is probably the second healthiest program in the Big Ten going into next year in terms of their roster and just the way Lanning has built it there. He has built an SEC Ohio State program in the Northwest. But the Big Ten is better, but Ohio State has this chance to be this constant in the North that never goes away. And I think with Saban out of the SEC, that's going to rotate. I think Kirby's going to have his run and Sark will have his run a little bit. Tennessee will win some from time to time. LSU could. They'll rotate who's the team down there. And I think Ohio State will be the constant. And I think not only the defining team, but I do think that they have that everything that you want with the Americas team in terms of the polarization. They are beloved or they are hated. And everybody watches. So it checks every box.
And that has been true because they are the number one draw. They are a bigger draw than Alabama or Georgia or anybody else. They are the number one ratings machine. And I don't want to downplay, and you and I have had many discussions about Michigan on your show. Harbaugh leaving is an opening as well. I mean, the idea that the guy in their way nationally and the guy in their way in their backyard both left is a gigantic opening. It is a sea change because context matters. And sometimes in life, it doesn't matter how good you are because there's somebody down the street or in another state or somebody else in the world where they're faster than you. They're stronger than you. And you've trained, you've done everything you can do, and you just can't beat them. Nick Saban was that for the whole sport for a long time. And Jim Harbaugh had their number. And also, he had Connor Stallions in the sidecar. So, okay, we understand that. We understand that. But all those things have changed. So now, what is holding back Ohio State from potentially embarking on the greatest continued era of success in their history? Nothing other than winning is hard. But
yeah, you just got to go do it.
Even the losing has made the winning it should make it more likely. That happens all the time. It's easier to win after you've lost. It's hard to keep winning, which is why Saban is an all-time great. But the fact that they're reaping the benefits of Caleb Downs and Julian saying direct benefits of Saban being gone, and now they're recruiting high school guys in Alabama, which wouldn't have happened before. It is there for the taking in a way that I don't. And again, why? It's can you let them beat Michigan, Doug? Could you let them beat Michigan once before you do this to them? Hey, Ryan. Ryan, are you potentially embarking on the greatest run in Ohio State history? It's Ryan. It's could we beat Marshall? Shut up. Why are you doing this? Yeah. But that's why we're here. And I just, but if you think about the potential, I hope it makes the darkness slightly more palatable. Because I think what we have shown is, I don't know if the darkness is required, but it probably is. It's hard to be excellent for 50 straight years. And Ohio State, as we said, has never fallen off a cliff, but you've got to have a little bit of a downturn to build up to the next great era. And maybe that's what these 3 straight Michigan losses and the Georgia loss and even the Missouri bowl game. What if the last thing of this end of this darkness is them being embarrassed in a bowl game and then Michigan winning the national title? And that's the line. That feels like a pretty hard line in the sand, man.
They just have to go do it. There's nothing preventing them. That's why this season that is upcoming is as pressure packed as anything you and I have ever been prepared to witness. There's nothing like what's coming with this. I wasn't here for Coop. But just the way that this sport is played, the money in it, all of it, there's never been anything like this. What this Buckeye team is going to try to tackle is formidable. Now their schedule is not, so that's beneficial this year. But in terms of the pressure week in and week out, it's going to be nuts. So all they have to do, it's there for them. It's there for the taking. It's set up. They're also selling something different, Doug. Columbus is a big city that is boomtown central. The rest of those programs, they're all selling kind of a similar feel. Most of those SEC places all feel pretty similar one to the next. This is a totally different thing that they're selling. So it's set up. Now just go do it.
America, college football, and maybe the Buckeyes. That's what we're talking about here on Kings of Columbus. Beau, when it's time for big ideas, you are the man to have on the show. So we certainly appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to talk to us here on Kings of Columbus.
Nothing I'd rather do. Love you, Beau.
He's Beau Bishop. I'm Doug Lesmerises. Thanks as always to our great producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Happy 4th, everybody. That was Kings of Columbus.